My name is Mallory Smith, 32 years old. The last thing I said before surgery was to my mother. I held her hand and told her that if I didn't survive, everything I had was hers. All of it. I didn't want her buried under a bill the way my father buried her. 12 minutes later, she walked into the hallway and made a phone call. By 5 the next morning, my stepfather and my stepsister were standing at the window of my ICU room with their backs to me, deciding how to split a settlement I hadn't been given yet. 60-40. My stepsister asked what would happen if I lived. My stepfather said I'd get back up. He said it the way you'd say the sun comes up in the morning. My mother was close enough to touch my hand. She didn't. She said 4 words, and none of them were to me. Do what you want. They thought they were speaking over a body. 9 months later, my stepfather needed 1 signature from me to save his company. He had until the 1st of December. He was patient about it. He brought soup. He called me sweetheart. He planned a party in my honor and invited every person in this town he had ever wanted to impress, because he wanted them all to watch me sign. I told him it was perfect. He set a pen down in front of me on a Saturday afternoon in November. I didn't pick it up. I set something else down instead, face down on the table. I hadn't even touched it yet when my mother's face went white. But it starts with a hallway and a phone call I wouldn't ask her about for 278 days. My father died in December of 2014. I was 21. He had chest pain for 9 days before he said anything about it. We found out later he'd driven himself to a walk-in clinic and left when they told him it would be $200 for an EKG. He came home, he ate dinner, he told my mother it was heartburn. 4 days after that, he called an ambulance himself, and then he changed his mind and canceled it because an ambulance ride in our county cost around $900, and he thought he could make it in the car. He made it as far as the end of Bellcross Road. The funeral was small. Everybody said the same thing about him, which was that he never wanted to be any trouble. 2 weeks later, the mail started. My mother and I sat at the kitchen table and opened it together. Hospital, ambulance, cardiology consult. A radiologist in a different state who had looked at an image for 11 minutes. She lined them up in rows across the table like she was dealing cards, and she went through them twice, and then she got a pencil and added them up on the back of an envelope. $70,000. She didn't cry. That's the part people never believe. She sat there in her coat because the heat was down to 60 to save money, and she looked at that number for a long time. Then she said, "Never again." She said it twice. Listen to me, never again. I was 21 years old, and I thought she was making me a promise. The next week, we went to the bank. In the parking lot, my mother explained that she wanted her name added to my account so she could handle things while I was finishing school. Paperwork, deposits, whatever came up. She made it sound light and ordinary, the way you would ask someone to hold your coffee. I signed where the woman told me to sign. I did not read it. Why would I read it? It was my mother. I want you to understand something about a joint bank account because I did not understand it, and that distinction cost me everything. A joint owner can usually withdraw money without the other owner's approval. To the bank, both names may carry equal authority. But authority to withdraw is not always the same as a legal right to keep money that belongs to the other person. I would not understand that difference until much later. Her name stayed on my account for 11 years. I never once thought about taking it off. The first Christmas without my father, my mother bought me a watch. We had a fake tree that year, a small one, marked down after Thanksgiving. There were 3 presents under it, and 2 of them were for the house. She handed me a box, and she watched my face the entire time I opened it, which was not something she usually did. It was a smartwatch, nothing extravagant, but it was the most expensive thing she had ever bought for a single person in her life, and I found out 2 years later that she had put it on a payment plan and paid it off over 6 months, $31 at a time, while we were eating a lot of rice. She said, "So you know I can always see you." That's what she said. I remember it because I thought it was a strange way to describe a watch. I wore it every day for 10 years. Years earlier, when I started recording quick billing notes during commutes, I had set a 2-tap shortcut that could start or stop a voice memo without making me navigate the screen. That was the last Christmas she chose me. I just didn't know I was standing at the end of something. She married Wade Kessler in the spring of 2017. Wade owned a restoration company. Old buildings, historic properties, the kind of work where you save the original beams instead of tearing them out. He had a truck with his name painted on the door and a house with a finished basement and dental insurance. When he shook my hand for the first time, he held on a beat too long and told me he'd take care of her now. My mother held his arm at that wedding like she was holding a railing on a set of stairs. There's a photograph from that day. I've looked at it more times than I want to admit. My mother is in the center. Wade is beside her. His daughter Bryn is on his other side with her head on his shoulder. I'm at the edge of the frame. Half of my left arm is cut off. Nobody told me to move in. Bryn is 3 years older than me. In 2018, her nail salon went under. It went under for the reason most of them do, which is that she signed a 5-year lease on a space she could not fill and hired 4 people she could not pay. She cried at Sunday dinner about it. Everyone was very gentle with her. My mother called me that Tuesday and asked how much I had saved. She already knew the answer, roughly, because I had told her the month before. I had $9,000 set aside for a certification course, an advanced credential in medical coding and billing auditing. It was going to take me 11 weeks and move me up 2 pay bands. Then she asked for all $9,000. My first answer was no. I want to be honest about that. It came out small, and I gave it while looking at the floor. She came around the table and hugged me. A real hug, with both arms, the kind she had not given me since the kitchen table with the envelopes. Into my hair, she asked, "Do you know why I'm asking you and not her?" I told her I did not. Because Bryn wouldn't survive it. You would. You always get back up. I gave her the $9,000. I was 25 years old, and I was proud. I carried that sentence around for 7 years like a medal. I used to think about it when work got hard. I'm the one who gets back up. That's who I am in this family. 7 years later, I would hear that sentence for the last time, standing in a gravel parking lot at night, and I would finally understand that it had never been a compliment. It was a reason. In January of 2025, I got laid off. The practice I worked for was bought by a hospital group out of Columbus, and they outsourced the entire billing department in a single conference call that lasted 9 minutes. 8 years of my life. 9 minutes. Here is the math I did at my kitchen table that week. Unemployment, $412 a week. Rent, $1,150 a month. COBRA. That's the option to keep your health insurance after you lose your job, and you pay the entire premium yourself, including the part your employer used to cover. $680 a month. $412 a week came to less than $1,800 a month. Rent and COBRA alone consumed more than that before food, gas, utilities, or anything else. So I canceled my health insurance. I want to say this without any drama because there wasn't any. I sat at a table and I looked at a number and I made the only decision the number allowed. I told myself it would be 3 months. 4 at the outside. I was 31 and I ran 3 miles most mornings, and I had never spent a night in a hospital in my life. I called my mother that evening. She didn't ask if I was okay. She said, "You'll get back up. You always do." And then she told me about the new laser Bryn had financed for the med spa and how it was going to change everything. I said that was great. I hung up and I sat in the dark for a while, and then I opened my laptop and started applying for pharmacy tech jobs. February 17th, 2025, 4:20 in the afternoon. I was on the on-ramp to the highway, driving to an interview for a part-time counter job at a pharmacy in the next town over. I had a folder on the passenger seat with 3 copies of my resume in it. The truck was a beverage delivery truck. It came up the ramp behind me, and it did not slow down. We learned later that the driver had logged 14 hours behind the wheel without the required break. His electronic log preserved every minute. 5 months later, once my injuries and liens were documented, that record pushed the insurer into a settlement after less than 3 weeks of negotiation. I don't remember the impact. I remember the folder. I remember watching 3 copies of my resume come apart in the air in front of me, very slowly, like something happening underwater. Ruptured spleen, fractured pelvis in 2 places, internal bleeding they couldn't get ahead of. At 6:35 in the evening, a surgeon took my mother into the hallway outside the trauma bay. I was awake. I could hear about a third of it. I heard him say the words, "Prepare yourself." She came back in and stood next to the bed, and she was very pale, and I thought, she's going to be alone again. I reached for her hand, and she gave it to me. I said, "Mom, if I don't make it, I want everything I leave behind to go to you. All of it, whatever may come from this. I don't want you paying for anything, not ever again." She said my name once. I thought I was protecting her. I thought I was making sure that what happened to her at that kitchen table would never happen to her twice. I was loading the gun. A nurse came in to prep me. She cut my sleeve open, and then she reached for my right wrist and unbuckled the watch, and I tried to take it back. I couldn't talk by then. I just moved my hand toward it. She stopped. She looked at me. She said, "It's going in the bag, honey. It's not going anywhere." Her name was Corinne Doyle, and she had worked nights in that hospital for 19 years. They took me up at 7:10. At 6:52 that evening, while I was being prepped, my mother walked out into the hallway and made a phone call. It lasted 4 minutes. I would not learn about that phone call for 278 days, and when I finally did, it would be the worst thing anyone has ever told me. Surgery ended at 12:30 in the morning. At 2:15, Corinne Doyle came off shift. Before she left the floor, she went to the property bag, took out my watch, and buckled it back onto my right wrist, the unbroken one. She told me about it months later, in her kitchen, like it was nothing. She said, "You had it in your fist so tight I had to open your fingers one at a time. Nobody loses their things on my shift." That watch had a battery that held about an hour of charge by then. It was 10 years old. The screen was scratched in 3 places, and the leather strap had cracked at the buckle. Corinne powered it off before fastening it to my wrist. When I woke it, shortly after 5, it showed 9%. They came in at 5. I was coming up out of the sedation, not awake. I want to be precise about this because it matters later. My eyes wouldn't open. My hands wouldn't answer. But sound was getting through, and it was getting through very clearly, the way sound does when you can't do anything else. The blanket was pulled up to my chin. That's how I'd been left. The door opened. 3 people came in. Wade and Bryn walked past the foot of my bed and stopped at the window. They stood with their backs to me, and they started talking in a normal, comfortable, unhurried tone of voice. The tone you use in a room with furniture in it. Not the tone you use in a room with a person in it. I lost the first part. I want to be honest about that because it's the thing that shaped the next 9 months of my life. For about 60 or 90 seconds, I could hear the shape of what they were saying, but not the meaning. My brain was underwater. Wade said something about an account and about how he knew, and I heard all of it and understood none of it. Then Bryn said, "What if she lives, though?" And something in my head switched on. Wade said, "Then she gets back up. She always does." My right hand was under the blanket. It took me a long time to move it, longer than it should have. I held the side button until the face woke under my thumb. Then I turned my wrist, found the face of the watch, and used the 2-tap shortcut I had set years earlier. The rest of what happened in that room, I have. Wade began with the split. 60-40, I save the company, you save the spa. 60? Bryn asked. 60. The bond is what's killing me. If I lose the line of credit, I lose Grange Hall, and if I lose Grange Hall, there's nothing left to save. There was a pause. Something scraped. A chair, maybe. Bryn wanted to know whether anyone else had to sign anything. Wade answered without hesitation. "We don't need permission from anybody. Her name is already on the account." Bryn laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. That's what I've never been able to explain to anyone. It was a relieved laugh. The laugh of somebody who has just been told the bill is taken care of. And then there was my mother. She was standing 3 feet from my head, not sitting. There was a chair right there, and she never sat down in it, and she never touched my hand. She was the only one facing the bed. Months later, she admitted that she saw the blanket move over my right wrist and watched it for a couple of seconds. She told herself it was only a patient twitching under sedation. A patient with a fractured pelvis on a morphine pump twitches. Everybody knows that. It's the most ordinary thing in the world. She had a perfect excuse, and she used it. She turned away, and she said, very quietly, almost to herself, "Do what you want." The door closed. I found the face of the watch with my thumb again, and I tapped it twice more to stop it. I couldn't see the screen. I couldn't lift my arm. I had no idea whether it had recorded a single second. 40 seconds later, the battery died. I was in that hospital for 19 days. Here's what I came out with. A hospital lien for $612,000 because I had canceled my insurance in January. A wheelchair I'd be in for 4 months, and a walker I'd be in for 2 more. An eviction notice that arrived during my recovery after missed rent and late fees had pushed me nearly 3 months behind before I could manage paperwork again. And a dead watch in a plastic property bag, which I put in a drawer because the charger was proprietary and the model had been discontinued in 2019, and I had $4 in my checking account. Corinne Doyle put me in her sunroom. She had a house on the edge of town with a glassed-in porch off the back that she'd been meaning to insulate for 6 years. She put a space heater in it and a bed, and she told me it was temporary, and she never once mentioned rent. At night, it got down to about 54 degrees in there, and I slept in a coat. By April, Calls from hospital billing offices, outside providers, and collection agencies were coming as often as 9 times a day. I want to tell you what that spring was actually like without decorating it. I counted my pain pills, not to ration the pain, to ration the money, because I couldn't afford the refill. I ate instant noodles out of a mug in a wheelchair because I couldn't stand at the stove. I got very good at moving between the sunroom and the bathroom without waking Corinne up, and I kept a stack of paper on my lap, 46 pages of it, the itemized bill from Bishop Meade Regional, which I had requested out of habit because requesting the itemized bill is what I had done for a living for 8 years. One afternoon in the middle of April, I looked down at it. I had spent 8 years reading documents exactly like that one. I had read them for insurance companies. I had read them for a hospital group. I had read them for anybody who was paying me. Nobody had ever read one for the person who had to pay it. I pulled the stack up onto my knees and I opened it. It took me 3 weeks. I found that they had billed the same unit of blood twice, on 2 different dates, with 2 different order numbers. I found a procedure coded at a complexity level 2 grades higher than what was documented in my own chart. I found 31 days of ICU room and board, even though my entire hospital stay lasted only 19 days. I found a consult from a physician I had never met on a day when the notes say I was unconscious. I found an $8,900 charge for a device that, according to the operative report, was opened and never used. I documented $92,300 in billing errors. Then I used those errors, my uninsured status, and the hospital's own self-pay policies to challenge the rest of the lien. I wrote an 11-page letter, cited the codes, and compared every charge against my chart. 5 weeks later, Bishop Meade reduced the lien from $612,000 to $250,000. I had just cut $362,000 from a debt while sitting in a wheelchair in a 54-degree sunroom, and I still didn't have $1 to my name. Wade called me for the first time that same week, not the first time that month, the first time in his life. He sounded warm. He wanted to know how I was healing and whether I needed anything, and for a moment he almost sounded sincere. Near the end, he casually asked whether the lawyers had mentioned a number yet. According to him, he only wanted to know so he could help. I told him I did not know. "Okay, sweetheart, you just focus on getting well." I sat there after he hung up with the phone still in my hand. 8 years. He had never once called me. Not on a birthday, not at Christmas, not when my car broke down 2 miles from his house. And now he was calling. And now I was sweetheart. Corinne found the charger. She found it on eBay from a seller in Nebraska for $23, and it took 9 days to arrive. I did not sleep well for 9 days. I want you to understand what was riding on that piece of plastic. Somewhere on that watch, maybe, was 4 minutes of my family. Or there was nothing. There was a very good chance there was nothing. I had tapped a screen I couldn't see with a thumb I could barely move on a device with 9% of a battery that had been dying for 2 years. If the app had not saved or recovered the file before the battery died, there might be nothing left to find. The charger came on a Thursday. I plugged it in. The screen stayed black for a full minute, then 2, and then it lit up. I went into the voice memo folder. My hands were shaking so hard I missed the file twice. There was one entry, February 18th, 2025, 5:04 a.m., 4:12, 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I put my headphones in, and I listened to the whole thing once, in a 54-degree sunroom, in the dark. I heard Wade divide my money. I heard Bryn laugh. I heard Wade say that her name was already on the account. And I heard my mother say 4 words to 2 people who were robbing her daughter and then walk out of the room. I stopped it. I put the watch back in the drawer. I did not listen to that recording again for 6 months. But there was one thing I didn't have. There was that first minute I missed, the part where he explained how he knew. And that missing minute became the only question I had. How did Wade Kessler know that my mother's name was on my bank account? I had never told him. I had never told anyone. I had forgotten it myself. In May, Corinne told a nurse on her floor what I'd done with my hospital bill. That nurse told her neighbor. Her neighbor was Gail Ostrander, 68, widowed, $63,000 in medical debt from her husband's cardiac surgery. Her husband did not survive the surgery. She came to the sunroom on a Saturday with a shoebox. She apologized 4 times for the shoebox. I worked on it for 3 weeks. I found a duplicate anesthesia charge. I found a facility fee billed twice under 2 departments. I found $8,900 for a device the operative report says was never opened. $41,000 gone. When I told her, she sat very still in Corinne's kitchen and she put her hand flat on the table. Then she said, "What do I owe you?" I said, "Nothing. Don't worry about it." She got a checkbook out of her purse and she wrote out a check and she pushed it across the table at me. $12,300. She said she had looked up what advocates charged and chosen an amount she thought was fair. It happened to be 30%. She said, "Sweetheart, don't you do this for free. People won't believe you if it's free." That was the first money I earned after the crash. June, my birthday. I turned 32. I could walk with a walker by then, about 40 feet, and then I had to sit down. My mother sent me a text message at 8:14 in the morning. "Happy birthday, honey." That afternoon, Bryn posted photos. Wade's house, 20 people in the backyard, a sheet cake with writing on it. My mother is in the middle of the frame with her arm around Bryn's shoulders, laughing at something outside the picture. Really laughing. Head back. The caption said, "Celebrating our girl's new laser suite." I zoomed in on that photograph and I went through it very slowly and I didn't know what I was looking for. Then I realized what I was looking for. I was checking to see if anybody had left an empty chair. I named it Bellcross Patient Advocacy. Bellcross is the road where my father pulled over. I registered the LLC online, bought basic professional coverage, and set up secure client records. My office was still a folding card table in Corinne's sunroom. The business was very simple, and I could explain it to anybody in one sentence. I read your hospital bill, I find what's wrong with it, and I take 30% of whatever I save you. If I save you nothing, you pay me nothing. Gail told her church. The church told somebody at the Electrical Workers Union. June, 3 clients. July, 8. In the first week of July, I wrote Corinne a check for $900 in back rent she had never asked for. She looked at it. She put it face down on the counter and slid it back to me. She said, Put that away, and then hire me. The settlement came through on the 15th of July. Roz Hartnett, my attorney, called me from her car. The trucking company's insurer had folded fast because that electronic log was a disaster for them in front of any jury in Ohio. Gross settlement, $2,400,000. Attorney's fees, 1/3, $800,000. The hospital lien, paid from the settlement proceeds, $250,000. The number I had negotiated down myself in a wheelchair 4 months earlier. Net to me, $1,350,000. It hit the account on a Tuesday. I sat in the sunroom and I looked at the number on my phone, and I didn't buy anything. I didn't call a realtor. I didn't do a single one of the things you're supposed to do. I called my mother. She said, "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so happy for you." That was the last time she ever called me sweetheart. The following Monday, I opened my banking app to pay for physical therapy. Balance, $170,000. I refreshed the page. I refreshed it 3 times. Then I opened the transaction history. $760,000, Kessler Restoration LLC. $420,000, Vessel Aesthetics LLC. Both transfers had been authorized by the same joint owner, Nadine M. Kessler. The bank had verified her identity, confirmed her authority on the account, and processed the transfers after she signed the required forms. Nothing was hacked. No signature was forged. She used the access I had given her 11 years earlier. She had every right to do it. She'd had every right to do it for 11 years. I called her. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Wade picked up. He was calm. That's what I remember. He talked to me the way you would explain something to a slow child who was trying very hard. "Now don't get worked up. You're young. You'll make it back. You've got your whole life." Then he explained why Bryn was different. Her spa was everything she had. Without the money, she would lose the business, the house, the car. And unlike me, she was not built to recover from that. He reminded me that, according to him, he had supported me since I was 24 years old. I did not answer. Then came the sentence I still hear. "We left you enough to get by." He did not leave me money. He left me a number. He had sat down somewhere, at a table, in a truck. I have thought about it more than I should, and looked at my entire life, my career, my body, my 19 days, in an ICU, and priced it. $170,000. Then $118,000 of that went to rehabilitation, housing, taxes, and medical expenses. The settlement had not covered. I had $52,000 left out of $2,400,000. Roz Hartnett gave me 20 minutes in her office, and she didn't waste any of it. She said, "Your mother authorized the transfers, so she is the clearest defendant. Wade and Bryn may also face claims if we can prove they knew the money was yours and participated in taking or keeping it." I said, "So I sue all 3 of them?" She looked at me for a second. "You can," she said, "but it could take 18 months, cost tens of thousands, and put your mother at the center of the case. That's the part that got into my chest and stayed there. Not that they robbed me, that they had run the numbers on me, that somewhere in that decision somebody had asked the question, 'Will she come after us?' And somebody else had answered it correctly, and they had moved $1,180,000 on the strength of that answer. They thought they knew exactly what I would refuse to do. They just did not know what evidence I had." In August, Gail Ostrander gave my name to a man called Hollis Pryor. Hollis is a trustee on the Health and Welfare Fund for the local Electrical Workers Union, 2,100 members. He met me in a diner, and he brought a folder, and he made me sit there while he read 4 of my case files front to back without saying a word. Then he put them down. He said, "You saved Mrs. Ostrander $41,000. You charged her $12,300. I said, "That's the arrangement." He said, "Do you know what a hospital pricing consultant charges? $400 an hour, 40-hour minimum. They fly in from Chicago, and they stay at the Marriott." He tapped the folder. "You're not doing anybody a favor, Miss Smith. You're running a business, and you're running it cheap because you don't think you're allowed to charge for it." He took my proposal to the fund's trustees. 2 weeks later, after their administrator approved the contract, Bellcross went on retainer for $11,000 a month. That night, my phone buzzed at 9:40. It was Wade. "Hey, kiddo. Need a small favor. Just some bank paperwork. Nothing to it. Give me a call." Charity, you Earl Prosser called me in the second week of October. Earl was Wade's foreman. 19 years. He was the man who taught Wade's crew how to reset a 200-year-old sill beam without cracking it. He had to ask 3 people for my phone number and apologized twice before reaching the point. "Miss Smith, I'm real sorry to bother you. We were wondering when you might sign that paper." "What paper?" The silence lasted long enough to become its own answer. "Mr. Kessler told us you were handling the bank letter," Earl finally explained. "He's been saying that for a while now." After clearing his throat, he added, "We haven't been paid in 3 weeks. I've got 3 kids, ma'am." I sat in Corinne's sunroom and looked at the wall for 20 minutes. Wade had told his crew I was going to sign. He had told them before he told me. So I did the only thing I have ever been good at. I read the paperwork, county records, the township website, board minutes, which anybody can pull because they are public and nobody ever does. It took 2 evenings to put it together. Kessler Restoration had won the contract to restore Ridgeline Grange Hall. $1.9 million. It was the largest job Wade had ever taken in his life, and it was the only thing standing between him and the end of his company. A job that size requires a performance bond, a guarantee from a surety that the work gets finished even if the contractor goes under. The bond depends on his line of credit at Cumberland Trust Bank. The line of credit comes up for renewal on the 1st of December, and Cumberland Trust had flagged something. $760,000 had appeared in the operating account of a struggling contractor in July. Cumberland Trust wanted the source documented before renewing the line. If the money was repayable, it had to be treated as debt, which would damage Wade's leverage ratios and threaten both the credit line and the performance bond. If it was a non-repayable contribution, the bank could consider it additional capital. Nadine had authorized the transfer, but the money could be traced to my settlement. The bank, therefore, wanted me to confirm that I claimed no ownership interest and expected no repayment. Wade needed one document, a notarized gift letter, one signature, mine. I sat in the sunroom that night, and I ran the last 9 months backward. The phone call in April, asking how I was healing. The soup he brought in May, in a plastic container, which he set on the card table and looked around the sunroom and made a small sound in his throat, like he felt sorry for me. He was so much more relaxed after that. The text in August. Proud of you, kiddo. The Thanksgiving invitation. He wasn't sorry. He was tending a signature. He needed me warm. He needed me grateful. He needed me happy on the day I picked up the pen because a notary, he looks at your face. For 9 months, I had not been his daughter. I was a line item on a loan file. I called Roz Hartnett, and I asked her 2 questions, and the call lasted 4 minutes. The first question was whether Ohio allowed a person who was present in a conversation to record it without everyone else's consent. Roz confirmed that Ohio generally follows one-party consent, but warned that playing the recording publicly could still create legal and strategic risks. My second question was simpler. If I refuse to sign a gift letter, am I breaking any law? She laughed. Mallory, nobody is legally required to give someone else a gift. I hung up. I opened the drawer. The watch was still in there in the property bag with the hospital's barcode on it. I plugged it in. He came to the sunroom himself on the 20th of October. He brought the letter in a clear plastic sleeve, and he sat down on Corinne's plastic patio chair, and he looked around that glass room. The space heater, the card table, the extension cord taped to the floor. And I watched him decide that he had this in hand. That was his mistake, and it happened in the first 10 seconds, and he never recovered from it. It's a formality, Wade began. The bank just needs the paperwork clean. Once Grange Hall closes out, I'll make sure you're taken care of. Then came the family language. Family helped family. Mallory was the strongest person in the whole damn family. She always had been. There it was. Not just hers, theirs. The whole house spoke the same language, and I had never once noticed. Wade leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and lowered his voice. You understand that if the line of credit goes, I lose the company, I lose the house. Wade paused. And your mother lives in that house. He didn't threaten me. That's what people don't understand about men like Wade Kessler. He just laid the facts on the table in front of me, sadly, like a man who wished it were otherwise. I let the silence sit before mentioning the recovery gathering I was planning for November 22nd. Wade looked up immediately. Bring the letter, I told him. If you want everyone to see the family standing together, I'll sign it there. His whole face opened. He stood up, and he hugged me, and he held on, and he said he had always known what kind of person I was. Then he stopped at the door. He said, Have it at Grange Hall. We're almost finished. It's beautiful, Mallory. Wait till you see the beams. He was already picturing it. I want people to see it. I said, perfect. He made the guest list himself. I want to be very clear about that because it is the single most important fact in this entire story. I did not invite one person to that party who wasn't already coming. He invited Judith Brennan, chair of the township board, and the 4 other board members who had awarded him the Grange Hall contract. He invited Dale Fenwick from Cumberland Trust, the man whose signature would renew or refuse his line of credit on the 1st of December, because Wade wanted him standing under those restored oak beams when it happened. He invited his crew, all 9 of them, including Earl Prosser. He invited the pastor, 3 shop owners from Main Street, and 2 developers he was courting for the job after Grange Hall. Bryn invited a dozen of her best clients and 2 local influencers because she wanted content. He called me 3 times that month to ask my opinion on the guest list. I told him it was perfect. It was the most honest thing I ever said to him. I invited 3 groups of people, bringing the final guest count to a little over 70. Corinne Doyle, and 3 of the ICU nurses who kept me alive, Gail Ostrander, and 32 clients of Belcross Patient Advocacy, the mothers, the electricians, the truck drivers, the widows, the retired school teacher whose daughter drove her to my sunroom every Tuesday for a month. 32 people I had pulled out of medical debt in 6 months. $1.4 million reduced or removed from other people's bills. I did not invite a lawyer. I did not invite a reporter. I did not call the police. I didn't invite a single person to be a weapon. I invited the people I had saved. He invited everybody else. The week before, I did 4 things. I bought a Bluetooth speaker for $40 and I paired it to the watch and I tested it once at full volume in the sunroom with the door shut. I took the watch to a repair shop on Main Street and had the strap replaced. The old leather had cracked all the way through at the buckle. The woman behind the counter held up the original strap and asked if I wanted to keep it. I said, "No, throw it out." I printed invitations for all 32 Belcross clients at the copy shop. Corinne, Gail, and the nurses already knew they were coming. And I did not write a speech. The night before, Corinne made tea and sat with me in the sunroom while the space heater ran. "You're sure about this?" I was. She reminded me that I could simply refuse to sign. I could remain silent, let the bank make its decision, and never see any of them again. Nobody would blame me. I turned the cup slowly on the table. If I stay quiet, they'll tell themselves I forgave them. Corinne waited. "I haven't forgiven them. I just don't need them anymore. Those are 2 different things, and I want them to know which one it is." Then I took the watch out. New strap, scratched screen, 10 years old. My mother paid for it $31 at a time over 6 months, in a year when we were eating a lot of rice, because she wanted me to have one thing that came from her. So you know I can always see you. She was right. She could always see me. She saw me that morning. She stood 3 feet from my head, and she watched the blanket move over my right wrist, and she looked at it for 2 full seconds. She saw me, and she turned away. I plugged it in, 100%. Saturday, November 22nd, 4 in the afternoon. Ridgeline Grange Hall was built in 1878, and Wade Kessler had spent 14 months bringing it back. He'd stripped a century of paint off the oak. He'd reset the floor. He'd taken down a dropped ceiling from 1962 and found the original trusses underneath, and he'd saved every one of them. It was, and I'll say this because it's true, the best work of his life. He was giving tours when I came in. He had a group of them under the beams with his hand up, pointing. I was 15 minutes late. I walked in on my own legs. No walker, no cane. It was the first time I had tried that many steps in public without one. I didn't announce it. Nobody in that room but 4 nurses knew what it cost. My mother saw me from across the floor. She looked at my face. Then she looked down at my right wrist. She didn't say anything. At 4:30, Wade tapped a glass. More than 70 people turned around. He said, 9 months ago, I thought we were going to lose this girl. He let that sit. He was good at this. Today, she's standing right there. And today, she's going to do something for this family that I am never going to forget. Somebody clapped. Dale Fennick, from the bank, nodded once, pleased. Judith Brennan smiled at my mother. Wade set the gift letter down on the table in the middle of the room. He set a pen down next to it. I walked over. I did not pick up the pen. I unbuckled the watch from my right wrist and I set it down on the table, face down next to the pen. Then I put the speaker down beside it. Nobody in that room understood what they were looking at. Wade smiled, a little confused, waiting for the joke. Bryn frowned. One person understood. My mother was standing 10 feet away, near the window. She could not have seen it clearly from there. She did not need to see it clearly. She was the only person in that building who had ever bought that watch. And she was the only person in that building who, 9 months earlier, had stood 3 feet from my head and watched the blanket move over my right wrist and looked at it for 2 full seconds and turned away and told herself I was only in pain. She has had 278 days to think about those 2 seconds. Her face went white. I hadn't touched it yet. I pressed play. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. More than 70 people. The oak beams. Complete silence except a heart monitor beeping somewhere in a room 9 months gone. First came Bryn's voice. What if she lives, though? Then Wade, calm and certain. Then she gets back up. She always does. The recording moved on. 60-40. I save the company. You save the spa. A moment later. The bond is what's killing me. Then Bryn again. And nobody has to sign anything? And they heard Wade Kessler say, in the voice he uses on job sites, calm and certain, and a little bit amused. We don't need permission from anybody. Her name is already on the account. And they heard her laugh. And then, at the very end, under the machines, very quietly, they heard a woman's voice say 4 words. Do what you want, and then the door closing. Nobody moved for a long time. Earl Prosser stood first. He walked to the table, took the company truck keys from his coat pocket, and set them beside the pen. Without speaking to Wade or looking at him, he walked out. 2 crewmen followed immediately. The others stayed only long enough to understand what would happen to their unpaid wages and the company they had trusted. Dale Fennick had his phone out. He wasn't looking at anybody. He was typing. Judith Brennan looked up at the beams Wade had been pointing at 40 minutes earlier. And then she looked at the floor, and she kept looking at the floor. Bryn's 2 influencers were already gone. I never saw them leave. And 32 people from Bellcross Patient Advocacy stood along the back wall, and not one of them moved an inch. Wade said my name. He said, Mallory. I picked the watch up off the table, and I buckled it back onto my wrist. I looked at him. I wasn't angry. I want to be honest about that, because I expected to be, and I wasn't. He just looked like a man in a room. You took almost everything, I told him. And after all of it, you still need something from me. I glanced at the unsigned letter. That is the part you will never understand. I picked up the pen long enough for him to watch me hold it. Then I placed it across the unsigned letter and walked out of the building. The parking lot was gravel. There was 1 sodium light on a pole, and it made everything the color of an old photograph. She came after me. She did not apologize. I want that on the record because I waited for it and it never came. Instead, she explained, you don't understand. I've been in that house 8 years. If he goes, I have nothing. Do you understand that? Nothing. According to her, I had always possessed something she did not. A job, an income, a way to recover. I let her reach the end without interrupting once. When she finally stopped, I asked the question I had carried for 278 days. How did Wade know your name was on my account? She stood motionless under the light, with gravel between us. I called him, she answered. A moment passed before she added, from the hallway. You were still in surgery. 12 minutes. 12 minutes after I held my mother's hand in a trauma bay and told her that everything I had was hers, she walked out into a hallway and called the man who would take it. She didn't stand by and let it happen. She started it. I said, why? My mother did not know she was ending it. She believed she was offering a reasonable explanation to a difficult daughter, and she used the same kind voice she had used while hugging me at the table in 2018. Because Bryn wouldn't survive it, she told me. You would. You always get back up. I was 25 years old the first time she said that to me, and I was proud. I walked around for 7 years with that sentence in my chest like a medal, and I took it out and looked at it whenever things got hard, and I told myself, I'm the one who gets back up. That's who I am. It was never a compliment. It was a verdict. My mother did not sacrifice me because I was weak. She sacrificed me because I was strong. Every ounce of strength I ever built, every time I didn't complain, every time I got up and handled it and didn't make anyone worry. I was filing evidence. I was building the case for why I was the one who could be spent. I stood in that parking lot and I let the silence sit for a while. You're right, Mom. I do always get back up. I let her hear the difference before finishing. I'm just not going to get back up toward you anymore. Then I got in my car. She was still standing under the light when I turned onto the road. Sheridan Yeargard. Here's what happened next, and I am going to tell it plainly because none of it needed help from me. On November 26th, the Township Board suspended work on Grange Hall and demanded proof that Wade could maintain his credit line, performance bond, payroll, and lawful source of capital. The minutes are public. On December 1st, Cumberland Trust declined to renew the line of credit. Dale Fenwick had heard Wade explain the source of the money in his own voice, and no unsigned gift letter could repair that problem. Once the credit line failed, the surety withdrew its support and the township terminated the contract. That Christmas Eve, nearly 11 years after my mother put that box in my hands, I stopped at the grocery store on Route 9. I was buying a ham I did not need for a dinner with 4 nurses and a 68-year-old widow. I saw her through the front window. She was in the checkout line in a thin coat, carrying a plastic basket instead of pushing a cart. She was counting bills slowly, one at a time, thumbing them over while her lips moved. I knew that motion. In December of 2014, those hands had counted my father's hospital bills at a cold kitchen table, pencil moving across the back of an envelope. 11 years had changed the place, but not the fear. Something in my chest closed like a fist. I want to be honest about what I felt, because if I lie about this, then none of the rest of it means anything. I loved her, standing in a parking lot in the cold, watching my mother count singles at a register. I loved her so much I could not breathe, and I did not go in. Loving someone does not mean going back to stand in the place where they let you die. I got in my car, drove home, and did not look back. By the end of winter, Bryn had shut the doors of Vessel Aesthetics. Clients had canceled, lenders had tightened, and the business could no longer continue. Wade listed the house to cover company debts. It sold the following spring, and he left the county soon afterward. Bryn went with him. Of course she did. Wade had always treated Bryn as the person to protect, and everyone else as something to use when protection became expensive. My mother traded her daughter for safety. She did not get to keep either one. After the house sold, my mother moved into a 2-room rental at the edge of town. It was the modest life she had spent 30 years trying to escape, reached by every choice she had made to avoid it. Once she was settled there, I asked my accountant to arrange a fixed payment through a separate account on the first of every month. Enough for food and basic rent, I told her. Not $1 more. Only contact me if the payment fails or the amount has to change. I gave the instruction the way I would read a number from a page. There was no satisfaction in it. There was never going to be any. I simply refused to be the reason my mother went hungry, and I also refused to sit across a table from her again. Both things could be true at the same time. By June of 2026, Bellcross Patient Advocacy had 4 employees. Corinne ran client services after leaving the hospital the previous October. In our first 12 months, we reduced $2,300,000 in medical debt for 116 families. 116 families who will not sit at a kitchen table 2 weeks after a funeral in a coat with a pencil and the back of an envelope. That's the whole business. That's all it's ever been. I know somebody listening has been called the strong one their entire life, the one who does not need checking on, the one who is always fine, the one who always lands on her feet. That was never merely a compliment. Sometimes it is the permission slip people write themselves so they can give you less and still call you strong. If someone once used your strength as an excuse to abandon you, tell me the sentence you wish you had answered with. I read them. I still wear the watch. New strap, same scratched screen, more than 11 years old, and it holds about an hour of charge. That is more than enough. It only ever needed 4 minutes and 12 seconds. My mother was right about me. I always do get back up. She just never once asked herself why I had to learn how.